The Philadelphia 76ers are simply the biggest tease in the history of the NBA. So obviously, if you've been watching, if you've been paying attention, which I know everybody who's watching this video has been, this has been a very slow season for the 76ers. As I'm recording this video, they are at the 11th spot in the Eastern Conference. Now, I will give them this excuse. Injuries have not allowed them to find any consistent rhythm or identity this season. Right now, they're sitting at the 22nd spot in offensive rating, and they're also 23rd in defensive rating. If you like those other advanced metrics and stats, right now they're sitting at the 28th spot in pace. So right now, they're genuinely a difficult team to watch because there's not anything in particular that they're doing very well. And as I said, the slow pace just makes them a very unentertaining team, on top of them just not having anybody available on a night in, night out basis. And like I said, right, it's mostly due to those injuries, so they do get that excuse this season. But let's say that we took injuries completely out of the conversation, right, and completely out of the equation this season. Hypothetically, if they were fully healthy, at this point, how much faith would we have in them as a team if that were the case? Because I feel like I've seen so many 76ers teams over like the last 6 seasons with these amazing rosters and an amazing amount of talent, and they still underwhelm majority of the time, right? The story of the 76ers over like the last 6 or 7 seasons has been filled with anticipation, really well-deserved anticipation, but consistent disappointment. There was obviously the Ben Simmons era where he comes in as this no-nonsense rookie and gets off to an explosive start and legitimately shows this potential as a future top 10, maybe even top 5 player in this league. I don't think he gets enough credit for how great he was in his rookie year. I know there was that debate about who should win rookie of the year between him and Donovan Mitchell, and there was that controversy and that conversation. And personally, I thought Mitchell was deserving of it, but Simmons was still 15-8-8 in his rookie year and helped lead that Sixers team to the 3rd seed out in the Eastern Conference. And from there, the front office really did an amazing job at building that roster up. They gave up some pieces later on to bring back Jimmy Butler, and at that point became a legitimate championship contender out East with Butler. They were at their absolute peak, literally bounces away from making their first Eastern Conference Finals appearance. Now, since then, there were some pretty questionable moves. I'm not going to act like they were completely perfect the entire way through. I'm talking about specifically when they brought in Tobias Harris and ultimately signed him to a very large contract, which at that time, in my opinion, I didn't think he was worth given his production and all of those things. So that was a bit of a stain on their front office. But even think about the fact that after that, they acquired James Harden and had him for a season and a half and made this video game like 1-2 punch between him and Joel Embiid. So largely speaking, this 76ers front office has done an amazing job. There have been some blunders here and there, but in my opinion, from a front office standpoint, the highs are way better and way more prominent than the lows. I can just simply never blame this front office. Like a lot of times when you have a team that just can't get right for some reason, the front office is like the go-to thing that we're pointing the finger at, and that's just not the case here for Philly. I think this Philly front office has done such an amazing job at building up a roster, not just through the trade market or the free agency market, but also through the draft, right? Like think about the guys that they drafted and developed. Their drafting through the process was amazing, right? There were some hits and misses here and there. Markelle Fultz was a miss. Jahlil Okafor was a miss, obviously. If we're going like way back, the Michael Carter-Williams thing came and went, but even with those misses, there were still a ton of diamonds in the rough. Thinking about Ben Simmons, who, like I said, showed off this ridiculous potential. Joel Embiid, who at that point, or at a certain point, established himself as arguably the best center in the NBA, and I really don't know where he stands right now in that conversation. Tyrese Maxey as well, one of the best up-and-coming young guys in the NBA. They've done an amazing job at not just trading away guys to bring back certain assets or signing guys on a free agency market, but also developing players and cultivating young players and helping them get to a point to where they are all-star, pretty much superstar level players at some point in time. So between Embiid, Maxey, Ben Simmons, and some others, they've done a great job at cultivating great homegrown talent. But for some strange reason, some of those guys just could never put it together. With Simmons, obviously we know what limited him. It was his lack of ability to shoot the basketball, and there were some injuries that played into it as well. But for the most part, if Ben Simmons got a jumper, then he'd be way more productive than what he is now, right? So I'm not going to use injuries to completely give Ben Simmons an excuse. With Embiid, it's a couple of things. It's that lack of availability and the injuries, but even when healthy, he's also largely inconsistent come postseason time, right? Joel Embiid is like right up there with James Harden as one of those guys who is offensively unbelievable, can put up these amazing regular seasons, but when it comes down to it in the postseason, it's just inconsistency, lack of great performances, and sometimes really just deteriorating as a player once those big moments come around. Luckily, there haven't been those issues just yet with Tyrese Maxey, but my point still stands, right? Philly's front office has put in amazing work over the years, but the players and coaching staffs or whatever, they have just really not come up to par despite all of this talent they've been able to get. And to me, this here was the season to clean everything up, right? This was the season where they finally put everything together. Every single team that runs into issues in the postseason and just can never get over the hump has that, like, quote unquote last straw season, right? Like, for example, I thought that's where Boston was last season before winning that championship. We had seen them get so deep in the postseason for such a long time with really nothing to show for it. Then they ultimately put it together and won a title. But last year was kind of like this prove it sort of year for them. Or think about Denver back in 2023. Before winning that title, they had been the top seed out west for such a long time, but just couldn't get over the hump. So that 2022-23 season seemed like their last chance to prove to fans that they were a legitimate team. And to me, that is where Philly was at coming into the season, and things just haven't worked out. Again, I know it's injuries that are playing a factor, but again, I said it earlier in this video, I'm not sure about how convinced I'd be of them, even if they were fully healthy. Like, if they couldn't make a James Harden and Joel Embiid 1-2 punch work, then what would make me convinced that a Paul George and Embiid duo would be any better than that, especially given Paul George's own issues with playoff consistencies and injuries? Now, the counter argument is this, right? Usually when Philly's been coming up short in the playoffs, they were under a different coach. That was Doc Rivers' regime, and people were not a fan of that. And I do think Nick Nurse is a better coach than Rivers. So I will give people that particular argument, but still, right? My faith with this franchise and with this team, it's really minuscule at this point in time. So who knows, right? In a perfect world, maybe they stay healthy moving forward into the second half of the season and find something that works. But Philly is like the ultimate I'm not going to believe it until I see it team right now. So we shall see. Again, I wish nothing but the best for this team. I don't wish failure on them moving forward because I really do want to see Joel Embiid finally make a deep playoff run and get to the East Finals and potentially to the NBA Finals. I hate seeing those guys who are amazing in the regular season and have these MVPs but can never get to that championship level. I don't wish failure on this team or this franchise, but again, I just don't have a ton of faith in them right now. But as I said, you never know what could end up happening. This could be a turning point at this point in the season for them to kind of get back on track. We shall see. But hopefully we see the Sixers team finally play up to the level they should be playing at. Their front office has done an amazing job at setting the table. It's just up to the players and the coaching staff to finally execute.